the 2024 election was a referendum on the Democrats' open border policies. For 4 years, they opened America's borders and deliberately trafficked at least 6 million illegal aliens directly into our communities, while the Border Patrol was overwhelmed arranging lodging, transportation, food, health care, and legal services for this massive population. Another 2 million gotaways entered our country as well. The result was devastating to our nation, and it produced one of the greatest political realignments in our nation's history. Americans suffered as their classrooms filled with non-English speaking students, their hospitals were overwhelmed by illegals demanding care, their food pantries stripped bare, and homeless shelters filled to capacity. The cost of these services is estimated at $160 billion a year, or about $1,250 from the taxes of an average American household annually. More ominously, among this population were the most violent criminals, criminal gangs, and cartels on the planet, often shielded by Democrat sanctuary laws and leftist DAs and judges. The sad, senseless, and entirely preventable tragedies produced by these policies continue to unfold before us on a daily basis. For 4 years, the Democrats in this Congress and this committee told us this was for our own good, and besides, there wasn't anything we could do about it anyway, short of their demand for widespread amnesty. But the American people knew better. They knew, as President Trump put it, that we didn't need new laws, we needed a new president. And we got one. And within 30 days, illegal border crossings were cut 96%, and traffic across the deadly Darien Gap dropped 99%, saving thousands of lives. Since taking office, roughly 150,000 illegal migrants, many with criminal convictions or charges, have been detained by the Trump administration as required by law, and the largest illegal mass migration in history is now being redressed by the largest repatriation. Reportedly, roughly 1 million illegal migrants have already decided to voluntarily return to their own countries as a result. We have a long way to go to restore the integrity of our immigration laws. Violent mobs in our cities have repeatedly attacked law enforcement officers carrying out these laws, and Democratic officials have said that the violence will stop once enforcement stops. In other words, if we enforce the law as the American people demanded, Democrats will burn our cities to the ground. Well, we're not going to allow such intimidation to prevail. In the coming months, we will report out of the Judiciary Committee a new version of H.R. 2, which will assure that this deliberate and rampant illegality can never again threaten our nation, our communities, or our people. The purpose of today's hearing is to determine to what extent our legal immigration system has been exploited, abused, and defrauded, and to recommend measures to assure that legal immigration to the United States is legitimate, honest, fully vetted, and above board, serving the interests of both the United States and those honest and law-abiding immigrants who seek to come here legally. America has the most generous legal immigration system in the world. During fiscal year 2023, the U.S. government issued more than 10.4 million non-immigrant visas, while nearly 1.2 million aliens became lawful permanent residents through the immigrant visa system. We will devote a future hearing to the deliberate subversion of the visa process by the Biden administration when the Inspector General publishes one of his forthcoming reports. Suffice it to say for now that during those 4 years, the administration sacrificed integrity and security in the screening process in issuing visas, exploiting the discretion and the legal requirement for in-person interviews with a consular officer. Integrity in the visa process is a matter of national security for our country. Take, for instance, the case of Mohammed Suleiman, who perpetrated a depraved anti-Semitic terrorist attack in Boulder, Colorado earlier this month. Suleiman had previously been denied a visa on at least one occasion, but was issued a visitor visa in 2022. 1 month after his arrival in the United States, Suleiman filed an asylum application. Such action clearly showed that he never intended to leave the U.S. once here, as required by his tourist visa. Subsequent statements by his family members have validated that assertion. Cases like this demonstrate why it is imperative that State Department and Department of Homeland Security employees who adjudicate visas have as much information as possible about the applicants. Some of that information is supplied by the alien during the application process, while other information is available through the U.S. government interagency screening and vetting process. But as we have heard in previous testimony about illegal alien border crossers, if an alien has no criminal or other security-related record, it's like they're, quote, being vetted against a blank sheet of paper, as one witness told this subcommittee last year. The same is true of aliens seeking visas. And there can be no substitute for looking virtually every applicant in the eye and questioning their motives, intent, and plans. Once again, President Trump has taken decisive action to improve screening and vetting of visa applicants. On Inauguration Day, he directed relevant agencies to identify deficiencies in the visa process and the resources available to allow for maximum vetting of visa applicants. Pursuant to that executive order, the administration has identified 19 countries that were uncooperative or deficient in providing background information on applicants, and the president accordingly restricted issuance of visas to their nationals. Non-immigrant visa categories that are rife with fraud and abuse include the student visa program, where fake schools are set up for the sole purpose of facilitating fraudulent claims of student status. The U visa is offered to those who are victims or witnesses to crimes and offer a path to U.S. citizenship. It should be no surprise that criminal rings have been uncovered that stage phony crimes and take advantage of this process. Fraud and lax vetting in the visa process do not exist solely in the non-immigrant visa context. The immigrant visa process is also routinely abused and exploited. Take, for example, the diversity visa program known as the visa lottery. Not only do bad actors impersonate U.S. government officials to try to get diversity applicants to pay them money, but fake documents and sham marriages have become commonplace. The Special Immigrant Juvenile Program is also susceptible to fraud and misuse, allowing 20-year-old foreign nationals to falsely claim abuse by a parent and be allowed to remain in the U.S. nearly indefinitely. And the VAWA self-petition process, conducted in secret without the knowledge of the U.S. citizen spouse, has also been subject to fraud as well. As this administration closes this dangerous chapter of outright illegal immigration under Biden, we must also protect our legal channels from fraud and abuse. That's the purpose of today's hearing, and we look to our witnesses for their guidance and suggestions on doing so. And with that, I now yield to the ranking member for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my 2.5 years as ranking member of the Immigration Subcommittee, I believe that this is the first hearing that the majority has held that is not focused on undocumented immigrants. I'm glad the majority realizes that there is an entire legal immigration system to discuss, a system that has not been updated in 35 years. We need a modernized system that meets our 21st century needs while also protecting American workers. Many of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle love to say that they support legal immigration and people coming in, quote, the right way. Well, this is their chance. Unfortunately, just over 150 days into the second Trump administration, the Trump administration has been making it exceedingly clear that it opposes all immigration, including legal immigration. Across the country, we have seen students picked up by masked immigration agents in unmarked cars, taken to detention facilities with no warning, and given limited information as to why they are being deported. The administration has revoked thousands of student visas as a weapon to stifle political dissent, restrict due process, and enforce an exclusionary and nativist vision of America that runs counter to everything our institutions of higher learning stand for. And just last week, video of masked ICE agents violently beating the father of 3 U.S. Marines has absolutely shocked the conscience of Americans across the political spectrum. The administration's actions to close off legal pathways will actually hurt America's ability to innovate and attract the talent we need. And make no mistake, they are not about national security, and we know this because just last month, Secretary of State Rubio announced plans to, quote, aggressively revoke student visas of Chinese students, all in the name of national security. And yet just 2 weeks later, President Trump, in announcing a so-called trade deal with China, said Chinese students would still be able to attend universities in the United States, even noting, quote, it has always been good with me. After a pause, the United States has resumed interviews for F, J, and M visas, but added new screening of the applicants' social media. These visas cover more than just students. They apply to physicians, university researchers, and au pairs, many of whom come to work for military families and others. And then earlier this month, President Trump issued a proclamation restricting or limiting the entry of nationals from 19 countries. In total, the 19 countries subject to these discriminatory bans have a combined population of over 475 million people. According to State Department data, the proclamation has the potential to block at least 34,000 green cards from being issued and over 125,000 non-immigrant visas from being issued every single year. Recent reporting also tells us that the Trump administration is considering adding an additional 36 countries to that list, 25 of which are from Africa. These countries may be subjected to partial or even full travel bans if they do not meet certain benchmarks over the next 2 months. And alarmingly, it appears that the Trump administration is attempting to coerce some of these countries into signing third country removal agreements to keep themselves off the ban list. The Trump administration has also stripped hundreds of thousands of individuals of their lawful parole or temporary protected status. Many of these people came lawfully from Nicaragua, Haiti, Cuba, and Venezuela, or fled these cruel regimes. Now, the Trump administration is actually making them undocumented and trying to send them back to their home countries where they may be abused or tortured. Now, it's not just African, Asian, or Latin American countries. Every day, it seems we hear a new horror story of Customs and Border Protection stopping and detaining someone at an air or land port who is from Canada or Europe. And often, they then wrongly send those people to ICE detention for weeks. This includes a German national on a fiancé visa who spent over 2 weeks in an ICE detention center because he and his US citizen spouse simply took a day trip to Mexico. Or at the Canadian border, a backpacker from Wales spent nearly 3 weeks at a detention center over confusion related to her visa before being allowed to fly home at her own expense. A Canadian woman on a work visa detained at the Tijuana border who spent 12 days in detention before finally being able to return home. And here's the kicker. A prime motivation of these detentions appears to be to overfill detention beds at private detention facilities that are run by for-profit corporations that bankroll Republican campaigns. These for-profit facilities are rife with abuse because they're actually incentivized to cut corners so that they can reap enormous profits, all paid for by the American taxpayer. The path forward for America is a legal immigration system that is modernized, fair, and adequate to meet the needs of our families and our economy. Attacking legal immigration, student visas, workers with valid visas, even sweeping up US citizens, that's not just morally wrong, it makes absolutely no sense. Making America less welcoming as a nation is already having a real impact. The United States will lose out $12.5 billion in tourism alone this year. Students and top scientists and researchers don't want to come to a country that suppresses their free speech rights or discriminates against them for what their home repressive governments do. That should not be what America is. I look forward to hearing from all our witnesses today, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Raskin, for an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very kindly, and thank you to all the witnesses for being with us today. There is more to immigration than border enforcement, as the ranking member of the subcommittee just said, and it's a good thing that our friends are waking up to that. President Trump and Stephen Miller's ambition to deport 12 million people from the country has been a terrible failure on its own terms, but even in its failure, it has turned our society upside down. It has terrorized both citizens and non-citizens, destabilized and divided our communities, wrecked small businesses who've lost their workers, and trashed our Constitution for everybody. It's gotten so bad that Donald Trump even seems to have recognized that his policies don't fit reality. 2 weeks ago, he gave the game away by acknowledging that hundreds of thousands of undocumented aliens working on the farms and in the fields are, quote, good longtime workers, and that he'd been lobbied both by his agriculture secretary and by large agricultural interests to stop the ICE raids on farms as they are spreading panic in keeping a majority of the workforce from showing up at work. So he decided he would stop enforcing the mass dragnet ICE raids there and invoke the same logic for the restaurant sector, also heavily dependent on undocumented people. Of course, it would apply equally then to the construction sector, landscaping and gardening, nursing, you name it. The vast majority of immigrants, even those here illegally, are not rapists and criminals, but hardworking people, essential to our economy, just looking to make a better life for themselves. Think of the dreamers. So it's good for us to be having the first immigration hearing in memory, not on enforcement tactics at the border or in our communities, but instead about visas. Alas, the president's record on visas is riddled with the same bursts of extremism and dogmatism and fanaticism that have made his enforcement measures so unpopular. He and his administration have tortured our laws and trampled our Constitution to kick out permanent resident green card holders and students and target universities who voice opinions that he disapproves of. As part of its effort to undertake a hostile takeover of America's colleges and universities, the administration interrupted interviews for student and exchange visitor visas. The result, about 15% of foreign doctors slated to begin their work at American teaching hospitals around the country were unable to get their visas in time to start the medical year next month, all at a time when we have a serious doctor shortage in the country that threatens access to care. And the monstrous reconciliation bill threatens to slash Medicaid funding on which rural hospitals rely. The administration has also recently implemented its xenophobic travel ban to unilaterally ban entrance to the country for all nationals of 19 different countries, with minor exceptions. Categorically denying visas to nationals of these countries does not make us safer or freer or more prosperous. It cements us in the eyes of the world as a vindictive, isolationist, and increasingly undependable and authoritarian country. The travel ban will likely have significant economic consequences by restricting travel and migration from the targeted nations. In 2022, at least 298,000 non-citizens from countries affected by the new travel ban arrived in the U.S. Most of them came to the U.S. temporarily, spending money as tourists or as students, fueling our economy. The following year, households with nationals from the targeted countries collectively earned $3.2 billion in income, paid $715 million in federal, state, and local taxes, and held $2.5 billion in spending power. Donald Trump also paused the refugee program, claiming the entry of these thoroughly vetted and re-vetted individuals would be detrimental to the United States. But then he allowed white Afrikaners to apply via a Google form and to undergo an expedited process to come to the U.S. as refugees. And it should shock no one to learn that after they arrived, reporters were able to dig up numerous anti-Semitic posts from the refugees. One of them had never been subjected, apparently, to the new anti-Semitism screen being used for other visa candidates. The title of this hearing is Restoring Integrity and Security to the Visa Process. How does any of this restore integrity or security? These random pauses, arbitrary bans, ad hoc detentions do nothing to improve security or integrity in our process. President Trump has turned our visa system into a terrain of caprice and selective punishment he can wield against his chosen political enemies and use to demonize and scapegoat immigrants, including visa recipients. This war on immigrants is designed to distract us from the fact that they're trying to cut 14 million Americans off of Medicaid, destroying small businesses with chaotic and unlawful tariff policies, gutting federal agencies and programs charged with protecting Americans against scams and frauds, and using the pardon power to transfer more than $1 billion from the victims of crime to the perpetrators of crime. Sometimes the president's had his lucid moments on immigration. During his first term, while saying he wanted to build a big, beautiful wall, he said the wall would have a big, very beautiful door, signifying his support for legal immigration. In brief, lucid moments like these, I try to find hope that we can work together across the aisle to focus on a secure border, the removal of immigrants convicted of serious crimes and public safety threats, a pathway to citizenship for the law-abiding, tax-paying, undocumented immigrants who Trump recently called very good, long-time workers and a modernized immigration system that will make it easier to come here lawfully while protecting American workers. We've come very close to doing this in the past. We can do it again. Tom Paine, who arrived in the country in 1774, fell in love with America when he got here. He said, this land will become an asylum to humanity. Not an insane asylum, mind you, but a place of refuge for people seeking freedom from religious and political and economic persecution and discrimination from all over the world. So let's live up to the original vision of the founders. This is a nation made up of immigrants and the descendants of people who were enslaved and of the original Native Americans. But this is a land of immigration, a land of immigrants, and a land of laws. We can make it all fit together, and I hope we can work together on a bipartisan basis to make that happen. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Without objection, all other opening statements will be included in the record. I will now introduce today's witnesses. We have with us today Mrs. Jessica Vaughn, who is the Director of Policy Studies for the Center for Immigration Studies. Prior to that, Mrs. Vaughn was a State Department Foreign Service officer serving in Belgium, Trinidad, and Tobago. Mrs. Vaughn has a master's degree from Georgetown University and a bachelor's degree from Washington College in Maryland. Simon Hankinson is a senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation's Border Security and Immigration Center. From 1999 to 2022, he was a State Department Foreign Service officer serving in several capacities in countries that included Kenya, France, Fiji, and Ghana. Prior to entering the State Department, Mr. Hankinson worked as a lawyer in London and a teacher in Miami. He holds a master's degree in modern history from St. Andrews, Scotland, a degree from the College of Law in London, and a master's degree in international security affairs from the National Defense University in Washington, D.C. Mr. Alex Norristow is the Vice President for Economic and Social Policy Studies at the Cato Institute. He's written on the economic impacts of immigration and the economy. Mr. Norristow received a BA in economics from George Mason University and an MS in economic history from the London School of Economics. And finally, Mr. Cody Brown is the managing attorney of Codias Law, a firm that represents U.S. citizens who are victims of immigration fraud. He's worked on the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee and is legislative counsel to a member of the House Homeland Security Committee, among other jobs. Mr. Brown earned an LLM from Georgetown University Law Center, a JD from Hamlin University School of Law, and a BS from Northwestern College. I want to welcome all of our witnesses, to thank them for appearing today, and we'll begin by swearing you in. Would you please rise and raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is true and correct to the best of your knowledge, information, and belief, so help you God? Let the record reflect that witnesses have answered in the affirmative. Thank you. Please be seated. Please know that your written testimony will be entered in the record in its entirety. Accordingly, we'd ask that you summarize your testimony in 5 minutes, and we'll begin with Mrs. Vaughn.
Thank you. Americans are all too familiar with the details of the mass migration disaster we experienced during the 4 years of the Biden administration, when about 9 million illegal border crossers and parolees were allowed to enter the country. Our foreign-born population has spiked to the highest point in history at just over 53 million people, and the highest percentage of our population ever, almost 16%. But not all of the newly arrived illegal aliens were caught and released at the border. Many arrived on visas obtained under more lenient rules put in place by the Biden administration. Under these policies, new temporary visa issuances went up by 25% to 11 million in 2024. New issuances of short-term B1 and B2 visitors visas, which is the largest and most overstay-prone category, went up 40% to 9 million in 2024 alone. Our visa process is improved, but still far from secure. Thanks to the more lenient policies, which include interview waivers, stretching eligibility criteria, and generally prioritizing swift approval over diligence in vetting, the visa programs have become much more vulnerable to frivolous and outright fraudulent applications. Not only does this often disadvantage qualified applicants who have to wait longer to receive visas, the fraud and abuse undermine public support and, worst of all, allow bad actors who are public safety or national security threats to gain access to our country. These risks are not minor or unreliable, and frankly, I think it's insensitive and irresponsible to trivialize these incidents that have occurred as a result of visa vetting failures. It's insensitive to the victims and irresponsible for policymakers to do so. One new example of a visa vetting mistake is Behzad Nejad, an Iranian man who was given a student visa in 2016 to attend the University of Texas. His status was terminated soon after he was arrested for domestic violence, but it took another year for him to be ordered removed, and ICE finally picked him up just this week in possession of a firearm on top of it. Then there's Abdullah Hassan, who came on a visa in 2022 and settled in Falls Church, attended George Mason, and was arrested last December for promoting violence against Jews online and planning a mass casualty attack on Jews in New York. Yes, it helps to have more interior enforcement, but the visa issuance process and the programs themselves need to be reformed to sift out more unqualified applicants before they get here. In 2023 alone, there were more than 18,000 entries of Iranian citizens on NIVs, including more than 10,000 on B1, B2 visas, more than 5,000 entries on student visas, and more than 1,000 on exchange visas. This is just way too big a haystack for ICE to have to sift through when there is a potential threat, as we have now. The problem is partly one of leadership to change the culture of travel facilitation at the State Department, but Congress needs to step in too by enacting statutory requirements for visa interviews, which are critical to evaluating applicants, and establishing consequences for overstaying, both for the person and the sponsor, and by providing resources for fraud protection. But it's not just a processing problem. We have to make sure that applicants are actually eligible for the visas they seek, and some of the visa categories, especially on the permanent visa side, are so conceptually flawed and have such inadequate statutory criteria that even when adjudicators are empowered to try to prevent fraud, they are almost powerless to do so. And among the most problematic and ripe for congressional action are two categories where state and local government entities are the gatekeepers to establishing eligibility: the U visa and the special immigrant juvenile category. The latter in particular needs urgent attention from Congress, especially in light of the hundreds of thousands of minors who've come in the last 4 years. We know we have a problem when applications spike as they have in the SIJ category, with more than 50,000 a year now. And when the specialty law firms are advertising all over social media, offering young illegal aliens who have no other path to stay here the option to claim that they were abused, neglected, or abandoned by one parent, even long ago, claims that are nearly impossible to verify, even if anyone tried. Criminal histories can be excused or may be unavailable to adjudicators if they were committed as a juvenile, making this the amnesty program of choice for MS-13 gang members, among others. And as with the U visa or some other programs, under Biden rules, the applicants get the work permit and protection from deportation long before the file is ever reviewed. Thanks again for the opportunity to discuss these issues.
Thank you, Mrs. Vaughn. Mr. Hankinson, you may begin.
Chairman Gill, Ranking Member Jayapal, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to testify today. Well, first, what is a visa? Let's imagine America is a castle surrounded by a wall. Anyone wanting to visit the castle first has to go to the main gate in the wall. That's the U.S. Embassy. The guards will want to know who the visitor is, where he's from, what he does, and why he wants to enter the castle. They ask a lot of questions and do their best to verify the visitor's claims, but they're limited in what they can find out. If they're satisfied as to his identity and truthfulness, they give the visitor permission to go inside and knock on the castle door. And that permission is the visa. It gives the holder the likelihood, but not the right, of being let into the castle. When the visitor knocks on the castle door, the person at the door is a Customs and Border Protection inspector. He sees that the visitor's gotten past the guards, but he'll still ask questions to make sure he's satisfied before letting the visitor inside. Visas have three main vulnerabilities: fraud, vetting, and overstays. Fraud is a fact of life in visa work. It varies by place and person, but applicants, particularly in poor and corrupt countries, lie to get visas. I've been lied to thousands of times. Consular officers are unable to see or to verify accurate records for most applicants, so they have to use their professional judgment. Vetting means checking for criminal records or other ineligibilities. Consular officers, again, are limited to what the applicant presents and whatever exists in U.S. government databases, which don't include criminal records for most countries. Some visa applicants lie about their intent in traveling to the U.S., and they overstay. And overstay rates by category of person and country of origin should be tied to refusal rates. For example, recent reports from consular posts have shown high overstay rates from students of English as a second language. So in response, USCIS should strip schools whose students overstay at high rates of the right to admit foreign students, and the State Department should limit issuing student visas in those countries of origin. A visa is a privilege and not a right. Just as the passing stranger has no right to get into the castle, no one has a right to enter any other country but his own. We are under no obligation to admit foreigners who come to the United States to incite anti-Semitism or terrorism or to attack U.S. foreign policy. And the law gives the President and the Secretary of State wide discretion to keep undesirable foreigners out, and their use of this constitutional prerogative must not be obviated by judicial overreach. At the same time, the original scope of some visa categories has warped into something unintended by Congress. I'll give just a few examples. The purpose of student visas are for foreign nationals to study in the United States and then return home to build their own countries. Now, we can retain the very best, but it was never intended that every student visa automatically led to permanent residency. The optional practical training program, which facilitates this, is not statutory and should be terminated. The H-1B visa was created 30 years ago to fill a short-term need for skilled labor with a limit of $65,000 a year. Today, many H-1B workers are paid below the median wage for their occupations. H-1Bs disproportionately benefit large tech firms and foreign outsourcing companies at the expense of smaller employers and American workers. The H-1B has thus evolved from a temporary work visa into a de facto immigrant visa that disproportionately benefits one country, India. Today, the unemployment rate for recent college graduates is nearly 6%, which is twice the rate for all graduates. Up to 70% of science, technology, engineering, and math graduates don't even work in STEM fields. Yet, even as they lay off thousands of workers, major U.S. companies continue to petition for thousands of H-1B workers claiming they can't find qualified Americans. We need to return the H-1B program to its original scope and put our own children and workers first. There are almost 300,000 Chinese students in this country. Some of them spy against the U.S. government, companies, and university research programs. And we do have visa screening to prevent this, but Chinese applicants can come on a tourist or other visa and then change status to student without triggering that vetting. We should not allow this. Visa holders seeking to change their status to student, researcher, or worker should go home first and apply to U.S. embassies so they're properly scrutinized. The biggest vulnerability of temporary visas is that holders can claim asylum once in the U.S. And with lengthy process, appeals, and a massive backlog, it's too easy to use a fraudulent claim to remain indefinitely. Congress should restore integrity to our asylum laws and make it harder to claim on frivolous grounds. They should speed up the process, and we should all make sure that decisions are carried out. There are many other possible ways to increase efficiency and integrity of visas. For example, we could prioritize education and skills over family reunification. We could reduce the standard authorized stay to 90 days instead of 180. We could end the vague duration of status for foreign students and journalists. Consular officers could be encouraged to apply the public charge rule to prevent migration of probable indigents. Or we could let only accredited institutions with a good compliance record admit foreign students and cap the percentage of those students. Now, with our southern border no longer wide open and interior enforcement once again underway, we have the time to consider all of these ideas and more. Thank you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hankinson. Mr. Naraska, you may begin.
Chairman McClintock, Ranking Member Jayapal, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to testify. Over the decades, the Cato Institute has produced original research on immigration, including the threat of foreign-born terrorism, immigrant criminality, and the vast economic contributions of immigrants and their descendants. Thus, it is a pleasure to be invited to speak on the topic of today's hearing, restoring integrity and security to the visa process. However, I must start with a criticism of the title of the hearing. The title, quote, "Restoring Integrity and Security to the Visa Process," implies that integrity and security were somehow lost or missing from the visa process. Nothing could be further from the truth. The visa security system was rightly overhauled after the 9/11 attacks and has only gotten more thorough, more complex, and expanded to cover more categories of immigrants and non-immigrants since then. But the ultimate proof is not in the legal procedures or the number of government employees who do the checks. The proof is in the security results. Since the post-9/11 overhauls, 19 people have been murdered in attacks on U.S. soil committed by foreign-born terrorists who entered on non-immigrant visas. Now, every murder, of course, is a tragedy, but perspective also matters when deciding how to save the greatest number of lives. For instance, it's likely that more people have been killed in the U.S. by shark attacks since 9/11 than by foreign-born terrorists who entered on non-immigrant visas. 0 people were murdered by foreign-born terrorists on U.S. soil during the Biden administration, the first administration with 0 such murders for as far back as we have data. That's evidence of a visa system with the integrity and security that Americans deserve. ICE recently arrested 15 Iranian nationals as of last night. The justification was a supposed terrorist threat from phantom Iranian sleeper cells we've heard so much about over the decades. ICE knew about these Iranian nationals, many of whom were criminals, before the administration decided to bomb Iran. If the threat was serious, why wait until now? ICE was likely too busy harassing non-criminals at Home Depot. The crime rates of immigrants, no matter what data sources you use, all show that immigrants and travelers have a low incarceration or crime rate, far lower than native-born Americans. Even foreign nationals from countries that don't cooperate and share crime data with the U.S. have lower crime rates than native-born Americans. There are always going to be bad actors, criminals, terrorists, spies, or others, who will try to enter the United States. The visa security system isn't perfect. It's not, and we cannot expect it to be. But it works pretty darn well. We know it works well because the proof is in the pudding. There is no integrity or security that we must restore to the visa process because it was never lost in the first place. However, increasing the security burden and banning immigration from country on flimsy security pretexts is costly. Obviously, visa security and integrity are important. However, visa security theater is not a free lunch, and that bill is paid by the United States in lost economic growth, lost opportunity, lower wages, and less government revenue. Immigrants are about twice as likely to start a business as native-born Americans. From small corner shops to billion-dollar corporations, immigrants are more likely to be entrepreneurs or founders than native-born Americans. Immigrant workers raise the wages of American workers by filling critical niches in the labor market. Immigrants are overrepresented in economic sectors and occupations, from agriculture and construction to childcare, engineering, and the sciences. Immigrants pay about $1.38 in taxes to the federal government for every dollar in benefits they receive. And the benefits to the United States go on. I want you to imagine what our country would look like today without immigrants from the past. The U.S. population is approximately 340 million. If immigration was shut down in the year 1800, there would only be about 100 million Americans here. Nobody in their right mind would think that those mere 100 million Americans in this alternative scenario would be richer or freer than the 340 million people living here today. So why do you imagine that our descendants would be richer if we closed the border today? The visa system has integrity. The visa system is secure. Don't be afraid of small threats, exaggerated hazards, or frightening rhetoric. Don't pile on more regulations, immigration restrictions that will reduce our security, and country bans that fix a non-existent problem. Don't impose that burden on Americans today or our descendants tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nowrasteh. Mr. Brown, you may begin.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Cody Brown. I'm the managing attorney at Codias Law, the nation's premier immigration law firm exclusively for U.S. citizens who've been victimized by immigration fraud, which I note is a felony under federal law. For years, the border captured the nation's attention while masking a far more insidious scandal, the collapse of the lawful immigration system itself, where the law goes unenforced and anti-fraud safeguards are deliberately dismantled. Why spend billions on border security if foreign threats can march through the front door? Immigration fraud is not a victimless crime. I know this because I walk with our clients through some of the darkest chapters of their lives. Half women, half men, They come from all walks of life. They span every demographic and political persuasion, from Trump supporters to super volunteers for Bernie Sanders. Our clients are falsely imprisoned. They're defamed. They are extorted. They are betrayed. They are sued for their life savings under the I-864. Some lose custody of their children. For some female clients, their final childbearing years are stolen, all so a foreign national can get an immigration benefit. What many of my clients do not know until today is that I, too, have walked in their shoes. On September 19, 2016, during a highly contentious presidential election cycle, I launched one of the earliest social platforms to combat big tech censorship. The launch was based in Austin, Texas, covered by Fox News, National Review, and Breitbart. Days later, an illegal alien, whom I did not know, I'd never met, accused me of stalking her. While walking to the grocery store with my wife, I was arrested by a fugitive task force at gunpoint, thrown into jail, subjected to a $75,000 bond without knowing who had accused me and even what the charge was. I learned the basic facts from the Austin American-Statesman based on an arrest affidavit leaked while I was still in jail. I didn't even learn the accuser's identity until I was served with a protective order. Her statements were riddled with contradictions. There was no corroborating evidence whatsoever. The alleged incidents occurred in areas with numerous surveillance cameras, yet I appeared in none. She claimed we had conversations, but I don't speak Spanish, and she needed an interpreter in court. When asked to identify me in court, she could not. 7 months after my arrest, the police finally disclosed my forensic phone data, which proved I was not anywhere she claimed. That is when we learned about the U Visa. The same month that I was arrested, the U.S. House and Senate Judiciary Committees opened a probe into the U Visa program. They concluded it's being exploited by those wishing to defraud the system and avoid deportation. Yet in my case, the judge prohibited my attorney from even asking about the accuser's immigration status. At no time during my prosecution was the U Visa ever disclosed. When we raised the issue, the prosecutor abruptly dismissed the charge. A private investigator obtained a confession from the illegal alien that she was seeking a U Visa. And when confronted with this evidence, the prosecutor in Travis County expunged the case. What I soon realized was there was another trial, one that I was never told about. It took place inside the walls of USCIS. Congress has created several victim visa programs that empower federal bureaucrats to act as judge and jury over whether a U.S. citizen committed a crime. These are secret trials. The U.S. citizen is never notified. There is no hearing. There is no cross-examination. There's no opportunity to provide counter-evidence, defend yourself. And by a mere preponderance of the evidence, a bureaucrat can convict a U.S. citizen of a crime, so a foreign national can get an immigration benefit. There are now 400,000 of these U visas pending over at USCIS. And these secret trials are not limited to just U visas. They occur every day in marriage-based cases, VAWA self-petitions, I-751 waivers, both of which allow a foreign spouse to accuse their citizen spouse of a crime to fast-track their green card. In fact, by volume, marriage-based fraud dominates the system, including one-sided marriage fraud, VAWA self-petition fraud, and I-751 fraud. Nearly a quarter of all new immigrants are spouses of U.S. citizens, approximately 300,000 per year. I'm almost done. The incentives for immigration marriage fraud are irresistible. Exemption from visa caps, adjustment of status, expedited citizenship, and accelerated chain migration. And throughout the 20th century, Congress repeatedly amended the immigration laws. If there's one thing I want Congress to hear, we want an appeals process with the Board of Immigration Appeals to enable fraud victims to appeal these false allegations in front of the board. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. We appreciate that. Now we're going to move on to 5 minutes of questioning, and I'll begin by recognizing myself. You know, for decades, the United States has had an existential problem with illegal immigration. This isn't something that's new. It wasn't something that was created under the Biden administration. We've had it for a long time. And Republicans in Congress and in the rest of the country outside of Washington, D.C., demanded border security, that Washington would actually do what we said we would do on the campaign trail and secure the border and stop the flow of illegal immigration. And what would happen in Washington is that Republicans would ask for border security. We would ask for a wall. We would ask for things that we can fund that would stem this tide of illegal immigration. And in response from the other side of the aisle, we would hear demands for amnesty, a pathway to citizenship for people who have no business being here to begin with, who came here illegally. And the result was that nothing was done to secure the border. One of the things that I'm most excited about the big, beautiful bill that we are working on and are going to get passed next week is that finally we can fund border security and mass deportations that the American people demand without having to negotiate on amnesty. In other words, the American people get what they would like. Republicans get all of our priorities. We get a border wall, we get river barriers, we get 10,000 new ICE agents. And we don't have to deal with demands for mass amnesty. That is a huge win, not only for conservatives, but for all Americans. And I'm excited about getting that done. I believe that mass migration is the single biggest existential threat to our country today. And we're going to begin by fixing that. So thank you to the witnesses for being here. Mrs. Vaughn, I'd like to start with you. I really appreciate your time here. Some claim that in order to finally secure the border for good, we need to make a deal on amnesty or to expand our already extraordinarily generous legal immigration system or work visa programs. Does this viewpoint put the interests of the American people first?
Absolutely not. The biggest problem, well, first of all, we've tried this in the past and it never worked. It was always amnesty now, enforcement if we get around to it. And so this doesn't work. But what we do know also from experience is that every time amnesty is raised, it destroys all incentive people have to voluntarily comply with immigration laws and go home on their own if they don't have a path to legal status. It creates incentives for people to stay here illegally and incentives for people to start trying to cross the border illegally as well. We should not be discussing, contemplating an amnesty of any kind until there is integrity and enforcement of the immigration laws that we have. That's just not something that should be on the table now.
Have the American people ever been promised border security in exchange for amnesty in the past?
Oh, repeatedly, most notably in 1986, when the amnesty happened immediately, was given to more people than we were told would be qualifying for it, and the enforcement promises were never applied, never materialized. And it's been promised in a number of other types of legislation in 2013, in 2007. It's always the same thing. Amnesty now, we'll promise to give you enforcement later.
Whenever amnesty is brought up in the national conversation, have you found that it leads to increased illegal immigration?
That is definitely what happened in 2012 before the so-called Gang of Eight bill. And during that discussion, and it has happened in the past as well. In fact, well, look at what happened before the Biden administration took office. They had promised amnesty during the campaign, and the illegal crossings and encounters at the border went up even before Biden took office in January. They were up substantially in December, the month before that.
Yep, and then I'd like to ask you about our green card system. Approximately how many immigrants are approved for permanent residency each year?
It's about 1 million per year.
About 1 million, and how many of those are via chain migration?
About 60%.
60%, awesome. Thank you, Mrs. Vaughn, appreciate it. And now I'd like to recognize the ranking member, Ms. Jayapal, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maintaining a healthy, robust, secure visa system so people from all over the world can come to America should not be a partisan issue. Immigration has always been and continues to be one of the essential factors to America's success as a nation. Immigrants set up our founding governance system, serve in our armed forces, power our economy in just about every sector, and have brought innovation and entrepreneurial spirit, with nearly half of Fortune 500 companies founded by immigrants or their children. We have, as our witness said, strong systems to ensure integrity with the terms of visa holders. There are already consequences for those who violate the terms of their visas. For example, committing marriage fraud to obtain an immigration benefit is already a federal crime. Our visa system has been the pathway for ambition and opportunity for so much of the rest of the world, and it's so disheartening to see the Trump administration do everything it can to destroy the legal immigration system. Look, I know this system very well. I might have come to one of the embassies that you were at. I came to the United States on a student visa. I made my way through an alphabet soup of visas. It took me 17 years to become a U.S. citizen, and I eventually ended up here as the first naturalized citizen to serve as ranking member of this subcommittee in Congress on immigration. That's a testament to the amazing things that can only happen in the United States of America. Mr. Narasta, let me ask you, your testimony does a great job of showing the intense level of vetting students and other visa applicants receive when applying to come to this country. Tell the American citizen that's out there watching what the benefit is to them of having foreign students come to the United States, and why it actually helps the United States if they decide to seek employment here after finishing their course of study.
So the benefits are extraordinary. Oftentimes, foreign students are the first step in a long process, just like your process, of eventually getting oftentimes OPT, oftentimes an H-1B visa, and then a employment-based green card, and then citizenship. That is the way that the immigration system has been set up in the United States. So if we want to have the benefits of high-skilled immigrants and entrepreneurs, people like Elon Musk, who started here in the United States on these same ways, and millions of other people, then we need to maintain a large, open student visa system because it's the first link in that chain.
Thank you. The Trump administration has targeted student visa holders in all these different ways, and there's been incredible chaos in the student visa system. There's been canceling of visas without warning, sending masked ICE officers to kidnap and disappear students, pausing visa interviews for student and exchange visas right when those applicants would normally be starting to apply for their visas. One student lost his status because of an issue with a fishing license. Another lost hers because she was a victim of domestic violence and the police picked up both her and her abuser. About 15% of the foreign physicians who were supposed to come here to work at training hospitals when we have a real dearth of medical professionals were unable to get their visas in time. How does all of that chaos hurt our country and our ability to retain and attract top talent that we need here in America?
The Trump administration's sowing of chaos in the legal immigration system undermines much of what makes this country successful, great, and free. Economic uncertainty is a killer. This is one of the things that I learned in my education, that I saw around the world, that you see in our practice. And nothing like uncertainty in employment, in legal residency, and being able to be here sows devastation. It makes people's lives unsettled, both for the immigrants and their American families, employers, friends, the schools where they are. Their neighbors. It unsettles everything. It is devastating to this country. It is devastating to them, and it's devastating to future Americans.
Let me turn to the absurd travel ban, arbitrary travel ban that President Trump announced. He alleges this travel ban is necessary to protect us from terrorist attacks and other national security threats. Is that true? Just yes or no?
No.
So let me go through some examples. Given the recent events in Boulder, Colorado, why is Egypt not on the banned list? Egypt was also one of the countries, along with Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Lebanon, who were involved in 9/11. Your testimony, as you noted, 98% of the people killed in the United States by foreign terrorists were casualties of 9/11. Why are none of those countries on the banned list? I mean, explain this to me. Make some sense of it.
I'm sorry, but I can't explain something where there is absolutely no sense. It doesn't make any sense. It's totally arbitrary. It seems like a justification for reducing legal immigration that is divorced from any legitimate security or national security or anti-crime perspective. It is just an arbitrary ban, and I guarantee we're going to have more of them come down the line that are based on nothing more than the desire to reduce legal immigration.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
Without objection.
To enter. This is a press release from the Department of Homeland Security, and it highlights that some of the Iranian nationals that recently were arrested enter the country or were ordered removed under the Trump administration.
Great.
Yield back.
Without objection. Thank you. And now the gentleman from Arizona, the great Mr. Biggs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In May, not one illegal alien was released into the United States. So, Mr. Nawarsta, do you consider that to be a successful month?
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
Good. I'm always looking for accommodation and comedy, so we have some comedy right there.
I think we have more than that,
So,
sir.
I don't know. We'll find out. The most recent Congressional Border Security Caucus, we had the ICE director, acting ICE director, Mr. Todd Lyons, come in. Mr. Lyons was describing visa overstays. So I would ask the panel, are you all familiar with the term visa overstays, Mr. Brown? You need to answer it out loud. Yeah, this is like a court of law. You got to answer it out loud.
Very familiar.
Okay, Mr. Nawarsta?
Yes.
Mr. Hankinson?
Yes.
And Ms. Vaughn?
Yes.
So let's talk about one visa overstay. I'm thinking of the Egyptian fellow who went on a rampage, an anti-Semitic rampage, and attacked people in Boulder, Colorado. Did you know that he was a visa overstay, Mrs. Vaughn?
Yes.
And what type of visa did he have before he overstayed?
I don't think I have seen it confirmed. I believe it was a visitor visa, B1, B2.
That's what's been reported anyways, that it was a visitor visa. And how many, Mr. Hankinson, how many visa overstays are there in the country right now, roughly?
It's
Microphone.
maybe 500,000 a year, total overstays, but not all of those are permanent. The figures are a bit difficult to parse.
Okay, so when we look at visa overstays, I want to go back here now to Mrs. Vaughn for a sec. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the architect of the 9/11 attack, said that marriage fraud is a, quote, fantastic mechanism for terrorist operatives to acquire valid documents, close quote. But rather than you, will go, Mr. Brown. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely.
And can you've given in your opening statement, you talked about how marriage fraud enterprises work. How would you describe DHS's process for detecting marriage fraud, Mr. Brown? Do they do that? Can they do that?
Their process is virtually non-existent. When I refer to the deliberate dismantling of anti-fraud safeguards, this is a great example. For example, under the last administration, one of the key fraud safeguards that Congress enacted in the Immigration Marriage Fraud Amendments Act of 1986 was interviews. They started waiving all the interviews. When our clients reported fraud, you know what they got back? Silence, nothing.
Yeah.
And I want to make this point. We have obtained internal data from USCIS. And from 2016 to 2019, a little subset, you know what their fraud denial rate was for the marriage-based cases? 0%, rounded to the nearest whole number. This is not accidental. Something is deeply, deeply wrong with our immigration system. And there's a lot of innocent Americans who are suffering.
Thank you for that. Mr. Hankinson, what's the process like for vetting student visa applicants?
Well, it's as good as we can make it. The interviews take just a couple of minutes, and most of the information that they provide can't be immediately verified. So we probably get it right most of the time.
So we have the acting ICE director told us the other day that in re-looking at some of these student visas, they had a student from China who was entering his 13th year of a baccalaureate degree program for a bachelor's degree. That seems, I don't know. I've put kids through college, and thank goodness none of them ever took 13 years to get through college. And if Mrs. Vaughn, if a student commits a crime or otherwise does something that would disqualify them for continuing on the student visa, how does that get reported to ICE or the school?
Well, if they are arrested for a state or local crime, ICE will get that information through the Secure Communities program, but ICE is not necessarily going to prioritize it because that, as a student visa holder, they are entitled to more due process than, for example, someone who's in the country illegally and commits the same crime.
So what the director told us is that it's not often that they're notified, and the school is rarely notified as well.
Yeah, the school wouldn't necessarily be notified.
So as my time expires, I would point out to my committee members that there's been some suggestions by Mr. Brown, Mr. Hankins, and Mrs. Vaughn on some ways to fix the visa system. I think it's worth reviewing. And then I've got a couple of unanimous consents. This one's called What We Know About the Visa Obtained by an Egyptian Man Who Injured a Dozen People in Colorado. Another one by Mr. Hankinson, actually. Commentary on the borders, on border security, and then a letter that we sent to Secretary Mayorkas just a few months ago asking for information about marriage fraud with regard to visa status.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Without objection. Thank you, Mr. Biggs. And now Mr. Raskin is recognized for 5 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The distinguished gentleman from Arizona began by talking about visa overstays. And so, Mr. Norris, I wanted to ask you about that. There's been a lot of discussion recently about a famous case of a visa overstay, that of Elon Musk, who had a student visa, was granted entry to the country, and then didn't go to school and said he never really wanted to go to school, but stayed and was able to get to work. And I wonder, in your response to the gentleman from Arizona, you said, or someone said that there's something like 500,000 people in this context. What are we doing about these visa overstays? And going back to your original comment, would we be better off if people like Elon Musk were kicked out of the country at that point, people who overstay a student visa or a work visa? Because my experience from traveling abroad is that oftentimes what we get in America is the most ambitious people, the people who want to work the hardest, create the businesses, win, Pulitzer Prizes and Nobel Prizes and so on. And he would seem to fall into that example. I mean, I guess he's in a category of his own, but somebody who was very ambitious and wanted to come here. But would we be better off making sure that everybody was kicked out of the country the day after their visa expired?
We absolutely would not be better off. We'd be substantially worse off if that were the case, especially in that example of Mr. Musk. The reason why he did what he did with the student visas and then the tricky H-1B situation, everything, was because there was no other way for him to come to this country lawfully. And it is absurd that in this country, which has been built by immigrants, all of us are descendants of immigrants here in this country today. We have a proud history of being open, that there is no other way for him to come here lawfully, to open businesses, to try his mettle, to create new firms that are multi-billion-dollar, $1 trillion of value that he has created in the world, and other people like him. The government should focus on the security threats. They should focus on criminals. They could go after these folks like ICE went after these Iranians in the last couple days, many of whom had criminal convictions. They should not be wasting their time on people with expired fishing licenses who are student visas. Now, the government does do a good amount now, especially under this administration, of trying to track down some of these overstays, but it's not a high priority because they need to go after criminals and national security threats and people like that. Every dollar they spend and every minute they waste going after non-criminals and people who aren't national security threats is a waste.
Okay. I think you're intimating views that are congruent with my own, which are we should make it much, much more difficult for people to get into America illegally and much easier for people to get into the country legally and lawfully. And I think that we have bipartisan convergence around the first issue, that we want to make it difficult to get in the country illegally, but we seem to disagree about the importance or the value of allowing people to get into the country lawfully. I think that our temporary chairman here said, and please correct me if I'm wrong, mass migration is the single biggest existential threat to our country today. What do you think about that as, you know, setting aside climate change, terrorism, social and racial division? Is mass migration the biggest threat to our country? If we had massive lawful migration, would that be a bad thing for America?
The overuse of the word existential is a prime example of threat inflation, of trying to terrify people for no good reason. The idea that the existence of the United States is threatened by immigration is absurd. It is just the opposite. The future of the United States is guaranteed and enhanced by immigration to this country. It is what will guarantee the growth. If there was no immigration, for instance, starting right now, the population of this country will start to shrink in the mid-2040s. There will be fewer Americans. There will be a smaller America unless we expand or at least continue the legal immigration that we have now.
Okay, so why do you think immigration has become such a vexed political problem? I know historically we've gone through periods of anti-immigration fervor and xenophobia, but if we've got the grounds for bipartisan compromises we've seen repeatedly, why do some people keep on wanting to use this as a political club?
So I think it's obviously a vote getter. It obviously infuriates a lot of people. And to be, totally fair to these folks who I disagree with, I do think people see chaos and they really don't like it, right? But I think the chaos is caused by our restrictive immigration system overwhelmingly. And if we want to get control in the long term, we need to do what you suggest, which is expand legal immigration opportunities to the United States. Enforcement matters, but legal immigration matters a ton too.
Time's expired. Thank you. We now recognize Mr. Tiffany.
Mr. Namarasta, do you believe the immigration system improved under the Biden administration?
Under some ways, yes, and some ways, no. So it's a very large, complex system, as you know. It's second in complexity only to the income tax.
So your colleague David Beer was here about 6 months ago, and he said, yes, the immigration system improved under the Biden administration. What's the change here of Cato's position?
So the Cato Institute doesn't have positions. The scholars of the Cato Institute do. But if you want to narrow in on the legal immigration system, then I agree with my colleague David that the legal immigration system did improve during the Biden administration. But there's large other sections of immigration that have to do with enforcement, other categories
you're going around telling people around the country here today that, hey, I'm going to split hairs, and I'm going to tell people that this one subset of immigration, hey, things are just fine in the United States of America. It's all good. When they understand this as a broader part of the immigration system as a whole, which has been a complete failure.
Well, sir, I don't work in talking points like that. I'm interested in facts, and the legal immigration system is not just fine. I've spent my career writing about how we need to expand legal immigration. So no, I don't go around saying it's just fine. I said that things have improved, and no, I don't go around
sir,
talking
don't
in
filibuster.
talking
I got questions to ask, and I only have 5 minutes. So you're saying you say in here vetting is effective and the visa process is secure. You stand by that, right?
Absolutely.
How did 350,000 children come into America that we have no idea where they're at the end of the Biden administration? How are there 600,000 criminal aliens in this country that committed oftentimes violent crimes, everything from attempted murder to carjacking?
The vast majority of those did not go through the legal immigration system. That is entirely the point that we are trying to make here today, is that they did not go through the legal immigration. If they did, then most of those people would have been weeded out.
This administration, which you said
This administration
did a good
or the
job in
last
some
one?
ways, the previous administration, they just let people come in without being able to get a visa. So does your data that you purport to put out there that proves this, does it include the death of Stephen Nashwell, a truck driver in Rusk County, Wisconsin, up where I live, who left behind 3 daughters? Does that include him in the data? He's dead as a result of an illegal alien running him off the road?
The evidence that we have is
Does it include the 2 children in Abbotsford, Wisconsin?
It includes all
also
people who are convicted of crimes in this country, sir, and all people who are arrested and all people who are incarcerated for crimes in the United States during multiple years, including the great state of Texas, which has wonderful data, the best crime data out there, confirms my research. Every death and every murder is a tragedy, and those individual criminals should be punished to the fullest extent of the law. But that is not a reason to punish other people who are not criminals for that.
Are they in the data?
Of course.
Are the 100,000 children that died of or young people, #1 killer of young people in America, ages what, 21 to 45, fentanyl? Do you include the fentanyl
You mean
deaths?
the people who voluntarily took fentanyl and overdosed under that tragic situations? No, those are not homicides, sir.
Or do you mean the communist Chinese who sent the precursors over here and then the cartels?
We're talking about the drug war
brewed it
now? We're
and
talking
sent
about
it
the
in.
drug war?
And by the way, they sent it in being carried by people who are coming in with the immigration system.
Why don't you count the
are
automobiles
defending.
imported that also
But
cause
you are
car
defending.
accidents?
Have you done, in your data, have you reviewed the impact on wages for those who are in the lowest economic strata with these millions of people coming into America taking their jobs? I'll end there. Ms. Vaughn.
Of course,
Ms.
I have.
Vaughn.
Vast economic literature on
Ms.
that
Vaughn,
contradicts your statement.
share with us, has there been an impact on Americans' earnings as a result of illegal immigration?
There's no question that illegal immigration causes unfair competition, costing people job opportunities, depressing their wages, and causing those millions of Americans who've dropped out of the labor market to have trouble getting back into it. No question.
So it's clear they're making less money.
Yes.
And that should be included in any data set when we're considering what we should do with immigration. Is that correct?
That's the inevitable result. That's supply and demand. When you increase the supply of labor, distort the labor markets, you're going to get lower wages.
Supply and demand. You're only talking about supply. These immigrants are people who are also raised.
Out of order.
No. I'll direct the questions to you, sir. Mr. Hankin.
I'm not asking a question.
Was there a cost to the fentanyl deaths here in America?
The open border made it a lot easier to bring in a lot of drugs, and a lot of drugs killed, as you said, about 66,000 people, just fentanyl alone in 1 year.
How much do you value a life?
You can't put a price on a human life.
I yield back.
Chair recognizes Mr. Nadler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Republicans love to claim that while they oppose illegal immigration, they are for legal immigration. Yet the Trump administration is doing everything it can to slow down or entirely stop legal immigration to the United States. Would you agree with that, Mr. Narester?
Yeah. Yes.
Under this administration, we've seen attacks on green card holders for exercising their free speech rights. We've seen a complete shutdown of the refugee program and a relentless assault on student visas. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you. The Department of State is revoking the visas of students in the United States without any transparency, while ICE is terminating the legal status of students and in some cases not even informing them of their respective institutions. Would you agree with that?
That's absolutely true, and it's a total travesty. It is a poor way to run an immigration system, and it's bad for the United States that this is happening like that.
According to recent reports, more than 1,800 students and recent graduates across 280 colleges and universities have had their visas revoked. Is that true?
As far as I know, in the most recent data I've seen, yes. This is changing, of course, all the time because the administration is so aggressively anti-legal immigration. It's hard to keep up with the new numbers.
Thank you. Mr. Narester, isn't it true that ever since World War II, the United States has followed a policy of attracting people from other countries to come and study in the United States, and that policy has led to tremendous scientific, military, and computer advancements that have helped make America the strongest, most technologically developed country in the world?
That's absolutely true. In fact, economist Charles Jones, who is one of the preeminent experts in economic growth, has found the increase in technicians and scientists and engineers, largely a lot of it fueled by immigration in the post-World War II period, can explain about half of productivity growth up through the 1990s. A tremendous increase and which result in a tremendous increase in wages, in new inventions, and economic growth that has made all of our lives better.
And you would agree, I assume, that we risk turning the greatest minds in the world away from the United States if we treat international students as like criminals.
That's absolutely one of the biggest risks and the things that worry me the most is what genius entrepreneurs like Elon Musk, or what great scientists like the woman whose name escapes me right now, but who helped discover the mRNA vaccine, are we turning away? What is the loss?
Doudna.
I'm sorry?
Jennifer Doudna.
She's an incredible, brilliant genius whose work has helped save millions and millions of lives around the world. And if she weren't allowed in here, I just doubt that she would have been able to make those discoveries and contributions in a country like Hungary.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Nowrasteh, the replacement rate to keep a population steady is 2.1 births per woman. The rate in the United States is 1.6 per woman. Now, obviously, this will result eventually in fewer Americans. I think you mentioned that. Yes. What is the effect of having fewer and fewer Americans, more and more people of advancing age to be supported by fewer people in prime earning years?
The economic effects are devastating. They are much slower economic growth, slower wage growth. We can see an advanced example of this in East Asia, especially in the country of Japan, which has had lower fertility, below replacement for decades now. It's no doubt that American fertility is below replacement, as you said. It will likely fall further. The only thing that is propelling growth in a good way, and has for a long period of time, is immigration to the United States. And I think supporting less immigration to the United States is the same as supporting a smaller America with fewer Americans, a less dynamic economy, and one where we have less of a footprint in the world. And I think that's a tragedy.
And one where more people of working age have to support, fewer people of working age have to support more people of advanced age, threatening our Social Security system.
That's right. It definitely exacerbates the insolvency issues with Social Security and Medicare. It will bring on those problems faster and in a more severe way. One of the best ways to maintain, and even the Social Security Administration acknowledges this when they model out their Social Security predictions, expanding legal immigration does help extend the life of these programs.
And what do we risk losing if the United States becomes perceived as a less welcoming destination for international students?
I think the United States will lose one of the great selling points and attractions for this country, the attraction of opportunity that has enticed so many of our ancestors to come here over the centuries. Part of what it means to be an American and in this country is the openness to immigration. That has been part of our history forever. We are all the products of that. This wonderful, vast country is a product of it. There are 100 times more Americans today than when this country was founded. We are better off because of it, and I want to see a future with more Americans.
Thank you. My time has expired. I yield back.
Thank you, sir. The chair recognizes Mr. Roy.
Thank the chairman. I thank the chair for calling this hearing. Mr. Nowrasteh, I assume that when you say you'd like a future with more Americans, that includes Jocelyn Ungare. Do you know Jocelyn Ungare? Have you talked to her mother, Alexis?
I know her. She was murdered by an illegal immigrant in Houston.
People who were released into this country with a notice to appear in court did not appear and then violently killed a young woman and is now dead. And her mother lost her. And she's one of dozens, hundreds, thousands of examples of Americans who are dead because of policies that were advocated for by the Biden administration and people parading around as libertarians. Ms. Vaughn.
Parading around as libertarians? What does that mean?
It means exactly what it means, Mr. Nowrasteh. It's my time, not yours.
That's a personal affront.
It is my time, not yours. I don't have any time to listen to libertarian claptrap.
I know you don't have any time to listen.
That is killing Americans, because that's what you're doing, and you're hiding behind a brand that is resulting in the death of Americans.
That's a heck of a thing to say to somebody, sir. That is totally false, and I take exception to that.
It's true, and everybody in America knows it.
I have not killed anybody, sir, and that is really exceptional.
Ms. Vaughn, when you go talk to Alexa Ungare and talk about her daughter no longer being with us.
Beneath you as an individual to say that to somebody,
Ms.
sir.
Vaughn, on June 25th, 2024, DHS Office of Inspector General released a report entitled CBP has limited information to assess interview waived non-immigrant visa holders. Are you familiar with that report?
Yes.
In that report, is it not true It says here that the report found the Biden administration expanded a COVID-era policy of waiving visa applicant interviews and fingerprint collecting to reduce visa backlogs and staffing shortages, which worsened at the peak of the pandemic. Is that correct?
Yes.
Biden took this COVID-era policy to admit over 7 million foreign nationals from across the globe into the United States. Does that sound correct?
Well, the numbers in later years are more like 9 million a year.
It's certainly significant numbers of people, millions, without having DHS interview them.
Yes.
DHS failed to fingerprint an unknown number of visas applicants during the 2020 to 2023 period, correct?
Yes, and actually part of that responsibility is on the State Department as well.
Do you find this discovery particularly troubling?
Absolutely. It underscores how much the Biden administration and others before it emphasized swiftness in processing, just moving these applications through, getting to yes, rubber stamping approvals over making the correct decision. And it emphasizes that vetting is not just a matter of looking people up in a database that may or may not have relevant information to the decision. Interviews are a way for them to establish the credibility of the applicant and whether they actually qualify for the visa.
I want to ask you about the visa waiver program as well. It ostensibly does not require an alien to possess a visa to enter the country, correct?
Correct.
And it's a gaping vulnerability in our legal immigration system, right?
Inherently, yes.
So with respect to that, are you familiar with the South American theft groups, particularly Chile, who commit burglary tourism through the visa waiver program?
I've heard a lot about them from law enforcement agencies.
For a time, Chile, a VWP program, refused to provide U.S. authorities the required background information on its nationals seeking entry into the United States despite entering into a security shared agreement in 2013. Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
So I sent a letter to DHS Secretary Noem and State Department Secretary Rubio to alert them to Chile's abuse. I'd like to insert that into the record without objection.
Without objection.
And DHS informed my office that Chile is now apparently complying with the agreed upon security agreements. However, because so many Chilean criminals have established theft rings across the nation thanks to the VWP, these theft groups have recruited Chilean nationals with no criminal record to enter the U.S. through the VWP to commit burglary tourism. Are you familiar with that extension?
Yes, yes.
And it's a real problem. And this is the kind of thing that multiplies when we have a lack of seriousness on these issues, correct?
Correct, and it exists with Irish contractors in the Boston area as well. They totally exploit these
Last question here. With respect to the U visa program, that presents an opportunity for alleged illegal alien crime victims to obtain work authorization and protection from deportation, correct?
Yes.
And on January 6, 2022, the DHS OIG again released a report entitled USCIS U visa program is not managed effectively and is susceptible to fraud, correct?
Yes.
I could go through a whole litany of things, but I don't have the time to do that. But I'd like to just acknowledge that problem, that OIG has recognized another problem, and I'll just finish with this, since I represent the southwest corner of Austin. Don't blame me for the downtown Austin stuff. But Mr. Brown, I'd like you to be able to have a minute to expand just a little bit further on how that abuse of the U visa program affected your life because of what we allow to occur and what that did to you and your family.
My wife still has trouble talking about it, and it felt like we were under siege, and it was confusing. We had no idea what was going on, and if I didn't have the background that I have, a little bit of law, a little bit of Homeland Security, I'm not sure most people would even know what happened. That's my biggest concern, is that people who are victimized like this, they don't know. If they don't know that a U visa program exists, how will they ever know to ask for that discovery? We have some prosecutors who we know refuse to disclose or even certify U visas until after a case is concluded.
Gentleman's time's expired.
There's something called the Brady Doctrine.
Yep, the gentleman's correct. I appreciate the gentleman's testimony and sorry that occurred to you. Yield back.
Chair recognizes Representative Scanlon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought this was supposed to be one hearing where we weren't focused on illegal crossings at the border, but instead we're going to look at reforms to our legal immigration and our visa programs, but apparently some of our folks didn't get the memo. Look, since the first day of this administration, it's been clear that its chaotic and often lawless immigration agenda is based on a false choice, one that mistakenly asserts that in order to keep Americans safe, we have to slam our doors to the world, ignore the laws and values that this nation has been built upon and our very history, reject the people and traditions that have actually made our country great, and turn our backs on a critical source of labor to support and expand our economy and especially our healthcare systems. So this administration has claimed to only be going after the worst of the worst, but day after day, instead of hardened criminals, we see them going after hardworking people with no criminal records who are being ripped from their workplaces, schools, the courts where they're pursuing their legal immigration remedies, et cetera. So we see people with legal status having had the rug pulled out from under them, including our Afghan allies. These are folks who had our troops' backs during that conflict and came here legally on temporary protected status, and now they're facing deportation. So refugee resettlement has all but been shut down. People who've already completed the complicated and arduous vetting and security process have been left high and dry, often placing them and their families in dangerous conditions overseas. And this administration is now targeting international students, people here to learn from and contribute to our universities, to our economy, to innovation, and to our healthcare systems. And it's penalizing green card holders for expressing opinions that this administration doesn't agree with, despite the plain language of the First Amendment. So ultimately, despite all the rhetoric we're hearing, these actions hurt our economy, hamper our ability to compete with other countries on the global stage, and really damage our reputation worldwide. We're already seeing, I think the figure was a $12 billion decrease in tourism as people are afraid to come here. They don't like what they're seeing. For centuries, America's been a shining city on a hill, a place where the world's best and brightest seek to come and contribute and be successful in a culture of innovation and achievement, and that's being tarnished. It's just moving away from that tradition is the wrong direction. So, Mr. Nowrasteh, my district is home to a bunch of colleges and universities, many of which have 10, 12, 15% foreign students. Revoking their visas without transparency, terminating their legal status, seems like it's a big problem. And I know I hear from these universities that one of the reasons they like having international students, aside from the different perspectives they bring, the different knowledge they bring, is they bring dollars without student loans. Can you talk a little bit about what is happening with respect to the decrease in international students?
Yeah, so they do bring in a lot of dollars, and American educational services are a large export of the United States. And this administration talks frequently about wanting to, close the trade deficit, which is frankly an economically meaningless term, but if they were really interested in that, they would actually liberalize student visas because it actually increases exports. It's a very valuable one, but the biggest benefit, of course, is what these people do if they do end up staying here. The firms that they found, the skills that they learn, the extra goods and services that they supply that make all of our lives better off.
This committee had a hearing on February 15th, 2022 on the essential role of immigrant physicians to American healthcare. Have you looked at that at all? I mean, we have a lot of folks come here to get their medical degrees. Many would like to stay. We have tens of thousands of doctor vacancies in this country right now. And we've had foreign physicians filling those gaps. Can you speak to that issue at all?
I can speak a little bit to that. I mean, immigrants are overrepresented in most medical sub-occupations, and they're contribute mightily to this. The United States has about 4 to 5% of the world's population. It would be extraordinarily accidental if those people who are born here happen to be the best of the best. I think we should really punch above our weight when it comes to that. But there are a lot of talented foreigners out there who could be great American physicians and medical professionals, and I think it's pretty absurd that we make it difficult for so many of them to come in.
Time has expired.
Thank you.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Representative Van Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to condense this down. Let's be clear. Nobody here on this side, I am not, against legal immigration. We are against breaking the law. We want to make this complicated. Not you all, I'm not blaming you, but in general, it's not complicated. We don't want the law to be broken. And the abuse that's going on, or did go on, is causing the American people to lose faith in our immigration system. And see, that's the worst of it. And I'm going to emphasize this over and over again. Unfortunately, folks on the left, folks on the other side, it's even happening today. They'll talk about doctors and teachers and scientists coming over and how we're going to stop that and they're going to not want to come over. They're not the ones we're concerned with. Scientists and doctors are coming over legally. They're going through the system. And they're actually getting hurt because of what has happened over the last number of years with the illegals coming in, because Americans are getting somewhat confused, unfortunately. Let's not blur this. Nobody is against legal immigration of good people coming to America. That's the way America was built. And as many times as the other folks on the other side will say immigration, I'm going to keep qualifying. We're talking about illegal activity and illegal immigration. And worst of all, we keep doing this over and over again. And under Joe Biden, the problem wasn't just illegal entry at the border, and it's what we're here to talk about today. It was our legal visa processing system. For years, that administration opened the floodgates. They allowed criminals in. They allowed individuals that were indicted in their own country or indicted here. They allowed individuals that were convicted in their own country or convicted here. We had people on the terror watch list, and I'm not only one saying that. We had the FBI director, the previous FBI director here under the Biden administration, no friend of mine, don't particularly care for him, but he said America was more dangerous than ever before in its entire history. And that's got nothing to do with Trump. He wasn't president yet. So let's cut it out. It's tell the truth time. It's time to be honest. And programs that were designed to bring in skilled workers, students, and seasonal labor have been twisted into a gateway for the wrong people to come into our country. Bad actors were allowed to skip the line. And all while good people that were mentioned and are mixed in were pushed to the back of the line, the people that we do want to come to America. That Boulder terrorist, anybody look at his social media content? He was involved in pro-Muslim Brotherhood propaganda. It was supposed to be a red flag. It usually is a red flag, I guess, but it wasn't red flag. It appears no one actually screened this guy. Meanwhile, I'm going to say it again, because I really want to pound this in, law-abiding, good immigrants who do it properly, they're waiting for years, and I'd actually agree, sometimes too long. They're good people. They love America. Some of them love America more than the people who are born here in America, because the system is overwhelmed by fraud and abuse. The more we let bad actors come into the system, the more it becomes harder for the good actors to succeed and make their way to America. And we've got programs that are good. People come here for a while and they stay. Some of them become citizens. Some go back every year and they work hard. Those are good people. But we're screwing them. We're giving them the short end of the stick. And that's why it's so hypocritical to mix in the bad folks with the good folks the way we are when we converse and debate about it. A secure legal immigration system is not anti-immigrant. It's pro-American and it's pro-immigrant. And we need to restore that integrity. So let's stop letting bad people abuse the system. I got some questions for you real fast. It's like when you vote. You got to vote for this one or that one. I simply want a yes or a no answer. I don't want a whole long thing, Mr. Nor'aster. I want a yes or a no. Are Americans safer when we stop thoroughly vetting visa applicants? Ms. Wan, you start.
No.
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 Good. Should foreign nationals with radical or anti-American social media be denied visas?
Yes.
Yes.
Broadly. Depends. I'm a free
Yes or
speech
no?
absolutist. I
Yes
believe
or
in the
no?
First Amendment of the United States.
You know, when you
so
vote,
I guess
you don't.
no.
When you vote,
As a
you don't
First
get to
Amendment
put a.
believer,
When
no.
you vote, don't talk over me. This is my time, not yours. When you
out.
vote, you have to make a decision. Is it fair to legal immigrants who wait years to let visa overstays apply for work permits after they broke the law? Yes or no?
No.
No.
Yes.
No.
Should someone who was, last one, should someone who was,
I'm
out of time? Okay. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I have two quick unanimous consent requests.
Yes, ma'am.
The first one is an article from NBC News entitled "Hundreds of International Doctors Due to Start Medical Residencies Are in Visa Limbo." And the second one is, because we've had so much conversation on overstays, it's the Homeland Security Fiscal Year 2023 Entry-Exit Overstay Report that specifically says that the overstay rate is 1.02%.
Without objection, admitted. The chair recognizes Representative Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the ranking member for holding this hearing. I'm gonna try to overlap in a positive way with Mr. Van Drew and talk about what we need to enhance legal immigration. I am absolutely convinced that we can fix our immigration system to deal with illegal immigration, the overstay situation. Obviously, we're working on the border, but we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Both the chairman and I represent one of the fastest growing areas in this country in North Carolina. Every day, and we just came back from being in our districts, I hear from the agriculture sector, largest sector, economic sector in North Carolina, the hospitality industry, the construction industry. We've talked about the medical industry, the research industry, that they need more workers and they need to have people who can get their visas. They need better H-1B processing. They need better H-2B visa processing. They want to hire people who are legal. But we have a backlog. We have not increased many of these visa quotas in more than 30 years. People want to come into this area. We are growing. We have amazing institutions of higher education educating lots of people from the United States. I'm very big on increasing the pipeline from the United States. But as we've discussed, in North Carolina, there simply are not enough people for our growing economy. So increasing pathways to legal immigration is either the first or the second highest priority for the North Carolina Farm Bureau, the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce, the North Carolina home builders, our education institutions. So, Mr. Nowrasteh, can you tell us how we could fix some of the problems that we're hearing with our visa system and expand opportunities for more of these people to get legal visas, because these employers in my district and in my state who are generating all the economic prosperity want to do it the right way?
The major problem with the legal immigration system in the U.S. is that it is far too restrictive, it is far too complicated, it is far too burdensome. It is the second most complicated portion of American law after the income tax. Now, I'm just a humble supporter of the free market, but I think that people should be able to go back and forth based on where they are demanded, where their opportunities are, where people want to buy and sell from them and to them. And I think that we need to expand these opportunities for low-skilled workers in areas like agriculture, but also create a visa for construction workers. I think we need to create a visa for manufacturing, for all different types, for every sector of the American economy, for mid-skilled workers, for people who are higher skilled, make it easier for them to come in, some of them temporarily, some of them permanently. I mean, but at a minimum, I think the thing that we can do is create a visa for entrepreneurs, which this country entirely lacks. I mean, that's the no-brainer here. That's the biggest no-brainer around.
And Mr. Nowrasteh, we've only touched on this. I have, ever since I got here, been one of the primary sponsors of a bipartisan bicameral bill to deal with what we call the documented dreamers. The children of H-1B visa holders who come over here before, they weren't born here. Sometimes their siblings are U.S. citizens, but they are not. And they literally age out of their visas when they're 21 years old. And the backlog is so long that they will never be able to get a visa or become a U.S. citizen. They're the children of highly educated people. Most of them are in college. We've paid for their education. And now we're deporting them to countries that we compete with. What do you say to those documented dreamers who I've been fighting so hard for?
You should be allowed to stay in the United States. You should be allowed to become an American citizen. You should be allowed to use your talents and your skills and your grit to do well here. The one thing we know about children doing well, or how well they're going to do in life, is it's related to their parents. And H-1Bs who come to the United States do extraordinarily well. They have above the 90th percentile in wages in the United States. So kids are going to do about as well as they do if we let them, if the government lets them succeed. And all we need to do is get out of their way. All we need to do is take the government out of this equation to legalize these folks and allow them to do what they want to do, which is to succeed and become Americans.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Ross. The chair now recognizes myself for 5 minutes. Ms. Vaughn, one of my greatest frustrations is the conflating of illegal versus legal. No one up here is against legal. We all want to strengthen it. But it's very hard to be pro-legal immigration and pro-illegal immigration. And this notion that we are the recipients of only the best, the brightest, only those who refuse to commit crimes, only those who give more than they take to this country, that is not necessarily the case in any way, shape, or form as it relates to illegal immigrants. I'm a former federal prosecutor. I saw a lot of the people that were coming across the border, many of whom we had no idea who they were. We had no idea that they were here until they committed some grievous act. Can you paint the other side of this coin, ma'am, and talk about the tolls that this country has received and been victimized by as it relates to illegal immigration?
Wow, let me count the ways. But I want to address one quick